Well, good morning, everyone. We are at the top of the hour here, 10 o'clock. I am your moderator for this webinar, ARC and PLC Enrollment and Selection. I'm Amanda McLean. I am the Farm Management Specialist here at North Dakota Farmers Union, and we have the privilege to join and partner today with the North Dakota FSA office, Laura Heinrich, who is the Farm Program Director, and also Ron Haugen from North Dakota NDSU, who is the farm management specialist, will be walking through the ARC and PLC calculators later on. Just a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everybody is on mute. However, if you have any questions at any time, please type them into the Q&A, and we do have built-in time for Q&A at the end for both Laura and Ron. This webinar is also being recorded, so if you are not able to attend all of it or know people who are not, this will be hopefully uploaded later today or tomorrow on the North Dakota NDFU webpage, or Laura and Ron probably can share that through their channels too. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Laura and let her begin. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Amanda. Are you seeing it okay, Amanda?
Yes.
Did you say yes?
Yes.
Yeah,
You're
looks
good to go.
fine.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I think you quick did the mute and I missed it. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you so much to North Dakota Farmers Union and NDSU for helping us get information out on the ARC PLC program. So ARC PLC stands for the Agricultural Risk Coverage and Price Loss Coverage Program. This program was extended under the 2018 Farm Bill last fall for the 2024 program year. ARC PLC provides a safety net to farmers and ranchers when there's a substantial drop in revenue or price for covered commodities. And with this extension, the deadline for the 2024 program year is March 15th of 2024. Under ARC PLC, there's 3 different program options that producers can elect and enroll into. The first program is PLC, or price loss coverage, and it provides exactly that, price loss coverage for selected covered commodity base acres on the farm. The second program is agricultural risk coverage county level, which provides revenue loss coverage at the county level for selected covered commodity base acres on a farm. ARC County is not dependent on planting a covered commodity on the farm in that current year. The third program is Agricultural Risk Coverage Individual, or ARC-IC. This program provides revenue loss coverage at the farm level for all acreage devoted to covered commodities across all of the producers' ARC-IC farms that are enrolled in ARC-IC. One or more covered commodities must be planted on the farm in the current year for an ARC-IC payment rate to be calculated for the farm and the producer. Payments under ARC-IC are based on the total of all covered commodity crop bases on the farm rather than the individual base acres of each covered commodity of the farm, as we pay under ARC County and PLC. So a couple terms that we talked about in the previous slides. One is covered commodities. So what actually are our covered commodities? They're listed here on the slide. In North Dakota, we do have all of these covered commodities except for peanuts, rice, cotton, and sesame. The other term is base acres. So base acres are the farm's historic crop-specific acreage of wheat, feed grains, rice, oilseeds, pulse crops, or peanuts that are eligible to be used for FSA program purposes. These base acres don't necessarily align with what the current plantings are on the farm. These base acres were originally established back in the 80s, and producers have had the opportunity to update those base acres throughout different farm bills. So if a producer chose not to update their base acres, Those cover commodities and acres tied to those cover commodities could be based on what that producer's historical planting was in the 1980s. The 2018 Farm Bill allows for restoration of base acres that were reduced for participation in our Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP. So if you had a CRP contract that expired last fall, September 30th of 2023, or you voluntarily terminate that CRP contract, we can add those base acres that had to be reduced for you to participate in CRP back onto the farm, and you can enroll those into the ARC PLC program. So how do producers elect which program they want to enroll into for the 2024 year? The 2014 Farm Bill does allow the opportunity to change elections for the 2024 program year. All producers on the farm must make the unanimous decision on which program they're electing, and owners do not make that election decision unless they are considered a producer receiving a share of a crop on the farm. So if an owner is sharecropping, they're receiving a share of the crop, they would assist in making that, or must make that program election for the particular farm. If they're cash renting that acreage out to another producer, the owner is not involved in that election decision. So just a little bit of history. Elections under the 2018 Farm Bill that were made for the 2019 program year also were effective for 2020. And then each year from 2021 through now 2024, producers had the opportunity to change that election on the farm. The deadline to change an election is March 15th of the applicable program year. Elections of PLC in our county are made for all cover commodities with base acres on a farm on a crop by crop basis. So you can interchange. You could have corn in PLC and soybeans in our county. Elections of ARC-IC is made for all cover commodity base acres on the farm. So if you choose to go into ARC-IC, if you had corn and soybean base, both corn and soybean base would have to be enrolled in ARC-IC or ARC individual. Any crop on a farm that a producer elects to participate in agricultural risk coverage, or ARC, so that includes ARC individual and ARC county programs, that producer would not be eligible for supplemental coverage option under federal crop insurance. So if you're considering SCO on a specific crop, you want to make sure you're talking to your FSA office and your crop insurance agent, and you will want to enroll into PLC for all of those, for that crop on all of your different farms. The ECO coverage is not, these restrictions are not applicable to it. And so you can, if you take ECO coverage with crop insurance, you can enroll in either ARC County, PLC, or ARC individual. So I'm going to go a little more into detail on each program. Under PLC, payments are earned for a covered commodity when the effective price is less than the effective reference price for the covered commodity for the crop year. The effective price or the marketing year average cannot be lower than the national loan rate. Under PLC, payments are made on 85% of the farm's base acres of that covered commodity, and payments are not dependent on planting of an applicable base crop on the farm. It's based on those historic acreages or base acres. This slide just lists all of the reference prices that's set for the Farm Bill, and so these reference prices are applicable to all 2019 through 2024. So to go in a little more detail on the effective reference price, the effective reference price means the lesser of the following: 115% of the reference price for the covered commodity, or an amount equal to the greater of the reference price of such covered commodity, or 85% of the average of the marketing year average price of the covered commodity for the most 5 crop years, recent crop years, using an Olympic average. So that's a lot of information and seems really complicated. But we have this slide here and this document is out on our public FSA website. And it goes through how that effective reference price is calculated. So if we look at wheat, the reference price on the slide before is $5.50. 115% of that reference price is $6.33. Columns F through J just list what the marketing year average price was for 2018 through 22. And then it does the calculation for us of 85% of that 5-year average. And that's the Olympic average. So you drop the high and low. So that's those line through. So it drops for wheat, it drops the 458 and drops the high of the 883. And then it averages the remaining three, the 516, 505, and 763 to come up with the 85% of the 5-year average is $5.05. So to determine what our 2024 effective reference price, or that's our floor, we look at the lower of column E, which is 115% of the 2024 reference price, or the higher of columns D, which is our reference price, or K, that 85% of the Olympic average. In this case for wheat, our 85% is below our reference price. So the 505 is below the 550. So the effective reference price for wheat for 2024 is $5.50. 2024 is the first time that we're utilizing 85% of the 5-year average for some of our more major commodities. For 2024, oats were actually capped at the 115% at the $2.76. So that's 36 cents above the reference price that was set by Congress. Corn is 31 cents above the reference price. Grain sorghum's 11 cents above. Soybeans is 86% above at that $9.26. And then large chickpeas, small chickpeas, and mustard also are using that 115%. Or I shouldn't say the 115%. They're using either the lower of the 85% or the 115%. So that's PLC. Payment rates for the ARC County program. Payments are earned when the actual county crop revenue of a covered commodity is less than the ARC County guarantee for the covered commodity. And ARC County payments are capped at 10% of the benchmark revenue. Payments are made on 85% of the farm's base acres of the covered commodity, just like PLC. And also like PLC, payments are not dependent on planting of an applicable base crop. The yields we use for ARC County in determining the actual revenue or the benchmark revenue are based on county data and not individual farm data. To calculate the ARC County guarantee, we take 86% of the ARC County benchmark revenue. That ARC County benchmark revenue is calculated by taking the 5-year Olympic average, marketing year average price, and multiplied by the 5-year Olympic average county yield. For that marketing year average price, we take the higher of the marketing year average price, or the effective reference price that we just talked about in the previous slide. And for the average county yield, we take the higher of the county yield that's set for that year, or 80% of the county T yield. When calculating the benchmark revenue and guarantee, we have a lag year that was implemented for the 2018 Farm Bill. So the 2024 benchmark year yields, I should say benchmark revenues, are utilizing 2018 through 2022 actual county yields and marketing year average prices. ARC County actual revenue, so that's the actual year. So for 2024, we calculate what the actual county yield is and multiply that by the higher of the marketing year average price for 2024 or the national loan rate. Then to calculate the payment under ARC County, we look at that guarantee, so that's the floor, and then compare that to the Ark County actual revenue. And if the Ark County actual revenue falls below the guarantee, then that would be the payment rate. But that is capped at 10% of the Ark County benchmark revenue. If that actual revenue is above the guarantee, it'd be a zero payment and no payment would be issued. When establishing the Ark County yields, we first look at RMA data. If there's not RMA data for that specific county and crop, we'll look to see if there's any NASS yield data for that county and crop. And then if we don't have NASS or RMA data, then the state committee will use the best available data to establish the yield. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, it did implement that for the Ark County benchmark revenue and guarantee, it's based on the physical location. So if your particular farm has land physically located in 2 different counties, we would do a weighted average to determine what the payment rate would be. The 2018 Farm Bill also implemented irrigated and non-irrigated actual crop revenues and guarantees for certain crops. In North Dakota, this slide lists all the crops and counties that have irrigated and non-irrigated benchmark and actual yields set. So the last program is Agricultural Risk Coverage Individual, or ARC-IC. Under ARC-IC, payments are earned when the actual individual crop revenue for all covered commodities planted on the ARC-IC farm is less than the ARC-IC guarantee for those covered commodities. The payment is capped at 10% of the individual weighted benchmark revenue for all covered commodities planted. Payments are made on 65% of the total base acres on the farm. So that's the total base acres. So that would include all of the crop base acres. So if you had corn and soybeans on your farm, you would add both of those base acres up of both crops, and 65% of that times the payment rate would be what your payment would be for that particular farm. And that's different than what we talked about under the previous 2 programs, which PLC and Ark County are at 85% of the individual covered commodities base acres. Payments are dependent upon planting of a covered commodity on the farm. So if you determine that you want to enroll your farm into ARC Individual, you do need to plant a covered commodity on the farm so that we can calculate a payment. Benchmark and actual yields are based on the producer's certified yields for farms enrolled in ARC-IC. And ARC-IC enrolled farms can use approved prevent plant acres when 100% of the intended planted acres of the covered commodities, again, that's covered commodities, are approved for prevented planting by FSA on that particular farm. And when we say farm in this sense, it is the individual FSA farm number. So the acreage that's involved in that FSA farm number, 100% of those acres that were planted to covered commodities were prevent plant. The ARC individual benchmark revenue is the 5-year Olympic average revenue, and that's calculated by taking the marketing year average price times the individual's yield for each year. It's calculated for each planted covered commodity on the ARC-IC farm in the current year, weighed and summed across all covered commodities on the farm. The ARC individual guarantee is equal to 86% of that farm's individual weighted benchmark revenue. And again, we use that lag year when we're looking at benchmark yields and prices. So for 2024, we're going to skip 2023 and use 2018 to 2022. And this sounds really complicated, but that's where NDSU has been extremely helpful, and they developed a calculator to help you determine if this would be the best option for your particular farm to elect and enroll into. This slide just gives a brief overview. I'm not going to cover it because this information was in the previous slides, but as Amanda said, they're going to post this recording and the slides onto their website. So you can go back and look at this, and it's just a quick comparison of the 3 programs. Payments for all three programs are triggered, or if triggered, will be issued on after October 1st of the year following the program year. So our 2024 payments aren't issued until October 1st of 2025. And that's because we need to determine that marketing year average price. So we need a full year of marketing information to set that price. So payments aren't issued until October 1st of the following year. There are some restrictions. ARC PLC producers are subject to an acre for acre payment reduction when fruits, vegetables, and wild rice are planted on ARC PLC payment acres. So if you remember when we talked about ARC County and PLC program, we said that the payments are made on 85% of the base acres. That gives you 15% of those base acres are considered free acres for fruit and vegetable planting. And so you can plant fruit and vegetables on 15% of those acres without having an acre for acre reduction. Under ARC individual, that was at 65% of the base acres is what we pay on. So if you enroll into ARC individual, then you have 35% of your base acres that you can plant fruit and vegetables on without having an acre for acre reduction. The 2018 Farm Bill did have a grass idle fallow provision. This provision is where farms where all cropland was planted to grass or pasture, including cropland that was idle or fallow from January 1, 2009 through December 31st to 2017, were not eligible for payments under the 2018 Farm Bill, so payment years 2019 to 2024. Those base acres were maintained, but for possibly future use, but there was just no payments made during these program years. There's also restriction for 10 base acre farms. So if the 2018 Farm Bill prohibits ARC PLC payments to producers on the farm if the sum of base acres is 10 acres or less. There are some exceptions. So if you're on a producer of more than one farm, FSA farm, and the combined acres of both of those farms is more than 10%, you would be eligible for those that 10-acre base farm. Also, if you are a producer who is historically underserved, you would also be eligible. Producers are required to file a farm operating plan with FSA so that we can determine that the producer is actively engaged in farming, that they meet our cash rent tenant provisions. Also, we need to do direct attribution, which is part of our payment limitation process. And then they also have to meet our foreign persons determinations. Excuse me. They also need to file an adjusted gross income form and meet the AGI provisions. And then they also need to file an 80-1026 to certify that they're compliant with our highly erodible and wetland provisions. The payment limitation for ARC PLC is $125,000. Just some additional compliance provisions that are applicable to ARC PLC. The producer must devote acreage, equal to the base acres to an agricultural conserving use. They must effectively control noxious weeds or otherwise maintain the land on the farm according to sound agricultural practices. They need to file an annual acreage report on all cropland. And then if they determine that they want to enroll into ARC individual, they need to file a production report by July 15th of the following year. For additional information on ARC PLC, you can go out to our National ARC PLC website, and the web address is listed on this slide. If you go under program data, that's where you're going to find like that effective reference price document that I showed you. It also will have information on benchmark yields. So any other like individual data information that you would want would be available under the program data. You can also apply online by clicking on how to apply, and it'll take you to our ARC PLC application where you can enroll from home. And then there's also there under the ARC PLC library, there's fact sheets, and then there's the frequently asked questions. NDSU has provided us the calculators for both ARC County and PLC and ARC Individual, and Ron will be covering those in just a minute. To utilize the calculators that Ron will be covering, you can obtain a FSA ARC PLC producer information sheet from your local FSA office. And this report contains all of the farms that you are an operator on. It'll give you the base acres, the PLC yield, your current program election, whether it meets the eligibility of the grass idle fallow or not, and whether you have a multi-year enrollment status. And this is what the informational sheet looks like. So what's the deadline for you to enroll in 2024 ARC PLC? The deadline to change a program election is March 15th, 2024. And the deadline also to enroll is March 15th, 2024. Annual ARC PLC enrollment is required each program year. So even if you choose not to change your election, you still need to contact your local FSA office and enroll your farm by March 15th. The only exception would be is that if you have a farm that you enrolled into a multi-year contract during the 2019 enrollment period, you would not need to contact the FSA office. Though that program election and how you certify to the producers receiving the base acre shares will roll forward to the 2024 program year. With that, that's the basic overview of ARC PLC. My contact information is here on the slide, and you can feel free to email me or give me a call if you have any additional questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Ron to go over the NDSU, ARC County PLC, and ARC Individual calculators.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I'll get my screen shared here.
So some of those links that Laura and Ron are talking about for the calculator and the ARC and PLC, I've been putting those into the chat function. So if you want to directly click on those there, you can find them as well.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I was going to go through the ARC PLC calculator that we have developed. Some of you that may have used this in prior years. This calculator is very simple as far as inputs go. You'll just fill in the yellow blocks, and you can see there's one table in here that you fill in. This program does have some limitations. We aren't accounting for irrigated yields. We don't have that included. And so just to keep that in mind. Before I get into the main input, I wanted to show you on the bottom, we have two other tabs. We have the benchmark yields, and then we have how the yields for the various years that make up the benchmarks. Okay, so you can look at that, and the program actually pulls that in when you pick a county. So first of all, it's pretty easy. You just put in your name, and then you put in your farm number, and of course, you can do that. You can elect by different crops in different farms. If you have 10 farms, you would probably just save this as an Excel sheet and under individual name, and then you would have this for each of your farms and each of your elections. We do have this for other states besides North Dakota. We have data for Minnesota, Montana, and South Dakota as well. You first pick your state, and then after you pick your state, you pick the county within the state. For this example, for this demo, I'm just going to choose Stutzman County in North Dakota. It pulls in information for Stutzman County. When you put in your information, there's this input table, then there's a secondary table, and then here's the data that it pulls in for Stutzman County. For example, it pulled in all of the yields from 18 to 22 for wheat and all the various program crops and the benchmark yield and then the benchmark price. So the first thing you do is the easy part. As Laura talked about, there's that producer information sheet. Make sure you have that in front of you. And all you really need to do is enter your base acres in this column and your PLC yield in this column. That's the easy part. Just enter it right off that sheet. For this example, we're just going to assume 100 acres of wheat, 100 acres of soybeans, 100 acres of corn. And these are the PLC payment yields from that sheet. The next two columns are the real guesses. And it is estimated for 2024. So you need to say, what is your county average going to be? Well, that's a real guess. And your county average is not your own average. If your county has poor spots in the county, that may be lower than your average if you're in a better part of the county. So you need to account for that. So I just put in some sample yields here. You can override any of this. Anything in the yellow, you can type over the top. And then the next real critical thing is the national marketing year average price for 2024. Well, we really don't know what that is yet by any means. The marketing year for 2024 doesn't even start until next harvest in 2024. So this is a real guess. So I put in some numbers here that are somewhat realistic, but you can override. If you don't think these are right, you can override any of these. So for wheat, that's one thing to remember, that this is the national wheat price, not the North Dakota wheat price. We have spring wheat in North Dakota, which is sold as a premium. So you need to account for that. This is the national price. That's what FSA uses. I just put in $11 for soybeans and $4.40 for corn, just for an example. Okay, so looking at this, we're not going to get any payments in ARC or PLC. None is showing based on what we put in here. And why is that? I go down to the second table. The wheat is the benchmark, which is, what's the benchmark? It's the benchmark yield times the benchmark price, okay? So that shows up right here. Take 86% of that. And what is the actual? That is what you put in. 60 bushels an acre, 660 a bushel. That's $396 an acre. You're $138 an acre a difference there, so you're not going to get any payment. Let's look at the reference price, the PLC part of it. The reference price was $5.50. The price that you think it will be $6.60. You're a whole $1.10 off, so there will be no PLC payments. Now, as Laura mentioned, there's a change now because of the reference prices, especially for major commodities like corn and soybeans. And you can see here that soybeans went up from $8.40, I believe, to $9.26, and corn went up from $3.70 to $4.01. So you're going to have more of a strategy here in your decision. And historically, when this first came out, everyone was going into ARC, and then later on it was more PLC when the prices were lower. Now when the price has been higher these past few years, then people probably ended up putting more things in the ARC program. So it's a real guess now. If the price of corn keeps falling, it could possibly get below the 401 mark. So let's just put in, instead of 440, let's just put in 380. And you can see what happens here. It shows you a PLC payment of $2,600 and an ARC payment of $3,500. Now, why did it give you those two numbers? Is because of the higher yields and the higher prices the past few years, the benchmark is increased. So you are going to possibly, it's a real toss-up on corn, especially on what to go into, ARC or PLC. It's a real guess. And so with wheat, not so much, and nor with soybeans, because the price is quite a bit higher above the reference price, probably more apt to go into ARC. But this is how it works, and you can see here the corn benchmark here is 155 times 485 to get the 755. The guarantee, that would be 86% of that. The actual is what you put in up here, 160 times 380, and you can see there's a $42 difference there. And then so you get $42 times your acres. With the PLC, you've got a 21-cent difference times your PLC bushels, $31.50 an acre. So that's going to be the real decision for the corn producers. And this is the basics of how the calculator works. I was going to say these little error messages that come up. Stutzman County does not have any yield data for safflower or mustard. That's probably not grown there in that county. Okay. So, and this, I have a note up here that this is with the data, with the FSA data that we just got in the beginning of January in those tabs. So that is the ARC PLC calculator. It's very simple inputs, but it's critical the numbers you put in. So I'm going to go and show you the ARC IC calculator now. Now, this is the one that we developed, and there is some limitations on this one too. Laura went over the ARC IC information very thoroughly, and we only allow 3 farms on this one. Some people said, why can't you have 10 farms? Well, the programming is just too much for that, and we just don't have enough resources to do that. So if you got 10 farms, you try jerry rig it and put it in, okay? But you want to put in your farm numbers, the ones that you're going to have in ARC IC, and then the total land in the farm, and then the total base acres for this particular farm. For this simple example here, we just have a farm with 200 acres and 120 acres of base. We're assuming then that it's 100% share. If you had other farms entered, you would actually get a weighted average of those farms. Okay, that's this table number 2. That's the easy part to enter that in. The next table shows you the higher of the national marketing year price or the reference price, okay, for these years that we're using in our calculation. And that comes from the data that's in these tabs. In this tab, we have the county yields, and we have the 80% of T, and then we have some projected prices for 2024, which are I put them in as a real guess, okay, a real guess. So the next is the most critical part of the ARC IC calculator, the yellow blocks here. You need to enter your farm yields for 2018 to 2022, and you enter that for the various base crops that you have entered, okay? And then down at the bottom in the fine print that nobody reads, but you need to read this, if the crop was grown, you enter the higher of your actual yield or 80% of T, which you can find in that tab. If the crop was not grown, then you enter the higher of the county average trend yield or 80% of T. And you can find that in these tabs. So that's the critical part. And as Laura might have mentioned, if you have a very low yield, ARC IC may pay out for you in 1 year, but how can you predict that you're going to have a very poor yield? You know, so for example, here I have 666 for wheat and 55 bushels, and 1080 for soybeans and 35 bushels. You can see the bottom table shows you will not get an ARC IC payment. But what I was going to do was just lower the soybean yield. Let's say you had a poor yield. Let's say it's 25 bushels. It still doesn't show a payment. Let's say 20 bushels. And there you can see that an ARC IC payment kicks in. So you just want to play with the numbers and see what you think. I don't know, there's a very small percentage of people that use the ARC IC, but we do have this calculator available for you to look at. So with that, I will entertain any questions for myself or Laura on what we've covered.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Laura. I think we'll do a quick poll question before we get into actual questions, which we have a few come in. So I'm gonna launch that and give people a few seconds or about a minute to answer those questions, if you don't mind. This really helps drive the need for the ARC and PLC calculator. So as we do that, I will get our questions going here in a little bit. And again, if anybody wants to use these calculators, I put them into the chat box along with the direct link to the FSA office for the ARC and PLC. So please utilize those. So we will take the first question. Sarah, or Laura, I think this is more for you. If the producer information sheet the same as an 156EZ,
So yes and no. It does have the same information that's on the 156EZ. It's just summarized and it lists, and 156EZ is specific to each farm number. And the producer information sheet has all of the producer's farm information. So if they have 3 farms, all 3 farms are listed on one sheet. But yes, it is the same information, just presented in a different format.
all right, thank you. What are the benchmark prices computed at the same level for ARC and PLC?
So when we talk about benchmark prices, we're looking at, actually, I think you're asking about the marketing year average prices. They are the same marketing year average prices that are utilized in both ARC County, ARC Individual, and PLC. It's how that marketing year average price is utilized in calculating either a reference price or an effective reference price or calculating a revenue for each program.
Is there any options to update my base acres on the farm?
Not for 2024. That was, you had the it's usually tied to a farm bill. So the opportunity to do any base acre changes was started with 2019, and didn't have the opportunity to update any base acres after that. It would be dependent on what Congress passes for the next farm bill for 2025 and future years. So there may be an opportunity, but we don't know that until Congress passes a farm bill.
This might be a question for you, Ron. Is it best to use county expected yields from SCO or ECO? That might be a question for both of you, but.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what they mean from SCO. It's probably good to use the average yield, because what else can you use, I guess? But I'm not sure that there's a separate yield for SEO.
They're talking about the 2024 expected yield.
Expected yield, yeah. But I mean, the only thing you can do is average it. I mean, unless you can predict there's going to be a drought or something, but that I would just say use the average, yeah. And that's one thing I failed to mention when Laura mentioned it too, that if you go into ARC, you can't be an SEO. So.
All right, thanks, Ron. Laura, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't.
Laura, I know we talked a little bit about this before the call. People were asking, is there going to be a webinar on ERP Track 2 program payments and how that works?
Yes, Ron and I are working on trying to coordinate our schedules to be able to provide that to you. We think it's always good. Ron gives such good insight on a basic producer level that I give the overview of the whole program, and then Ron really puts it into reality. So we're trying to work together. We're hoping by the end of February that we'd be able to have that webinar out. We're going to do it with NDSU, but Amanda's been wonderful and has offered to promote that, help us promote that. So look for Farmers Union information to come out on that also, and we'll have it in our state newsletter. And Ron will have it out on their NDSU website, but we're hoping by the end of February. We don't have a deadline that's been announced for that program yet. And since part of Track 2 allows producers to use the 2023 tax year, so we're not expecting a deadline soon because producers are still determining what their 2023 tax return looks like. So.
Well, thank you, Laura. And yes, we will be sharing information on that. We're also going to have a webinar on farm loans through the FSA office and the Bank of North Dakota coming in March too. So that might be of many of interest on this call. This might be for you, Ron. What's canola calculating at, ARC or PLC?
Oh boy, I guess I haven't really studied that to any degree. I guess I couldn't answer that. Yep.
Looks
Canola
like you have some.
canola is above the reference price. I know that, but
Another question. Are the reference prices set for 2024?
So that's the chart I went over in the, what slide number it is? Slide 13 has the effective reference prices for 2024 in it.
Thank you, Laura. Can you use federal crop insurance with ARC? I believe, Laura, you had a chart that said you couldn't.
Okay. So it's not that you can't utilize federal crop insurance. We want you to utilize federal crop insurance. You just can't take an SCO policy on the crop and have that same crop enrolled in, or I shouldn't say enrolled, elected into ARC County or ARC individual. So you can still have that base policy. It's just the SCO that you are not eligible to take if you elect ARC County or ARC individual on a fund.
All right, here's a CRP question. Is there a way to get base acres back from farms that come out of CRP?
And that's what we talked on slide 7 of my presentation. If a conservation reserve program contract expired and it had base acres tied to it, we do give those base acres back. So if you had a CRP contract that expired September 30th of 2023, we would give the base acres that were reduced because you enrolled in CRP for that particular acreage, we give that back for the 2024 program year. So yes.
He asked, what if I bought the CRP out of contract?
If you voluntarily terminated it, we would give it back in the year that you voluntarily terminated. Again, that's a voluntary termination. If something happened and it was terminated due to a violation, then we do not give those bases back.
We've still got a lot of questions coming through and still got a good amount of time. What are the acres coming out of CRP several years ago? Can you get those base acres back? You kind of might have answered that already, but
yeah, those base acres should have been given back at the time that it expired. And so a couple situations could have happened. Maybe there weren't base acres that were reduced because that land was enrolled into CRP. So then there were no bases to give back when the contract expired. The other scenario is if we miss something. So if you feel like there were base acres tied to that CRP program, you need to go in, or CRP contract, you need to go into your local office and ask some questions to see if they can go back and look and see if did we miss restoring some of those base acres. And there's provisions that we have that we can go through to restore those base acres.
What date range is used to determine my MYA price for 2024?
We're talking for the current year is what they're asking, right? What's the marketing year months?
that would be based on the crop.
It is based on the crop. So, and on that slide 13, there's a marketing year column in column B that has the marketing year for each crop. So wheat is June 1 to May 31st. Corn is September 1 to August 31st. Canola is July 1 to June 30th. So that slide does, if you want to go back and reference that, it does have the marketing year on it for each specific crop.
And as Laura mentioned, we definitely will be sending out the slides that Laura went over too. So if anybody didn't quite capture all that information or doesn't want to watch the video again, they can scroll right to that slide. Are spring wheat prices determined at a different rate than other wheat classes?
It's all wheat. So we're looking at winter wheat, spring wheat. It's all classes of wheat is how they determine that average. So that's, if it seems low to you, that is why, you know, most of the wheat grown in North Dakota is spring wheat, so it has a little bit higher price. But when you look at the whole nation, there's quite a bit of winter wheat that generally has lower price. So, I mean, it does look at the average of all wheat.
Laura, this is probably another question for you, but I think you definitely covered this in the thing. But how or where do you get the marketing prices from?
So the marketing year average price comes from our economic development department. And so they do surveys and they get that information from NAS too. So we work with NAS, and they do marketing year average prices, and that's the information that we utilize. If do you think that's where they were going with that question, Amanda?
I think so. I know sometimes people have typed in additional information if
Okay.
they felt we weren't answering it. So I think that looks like a bunch of the questions have been answered. We had pretty good return results. Ron, a lot of people have used your calculator before when they're using to determine if they're going to sign up for ARC and PLC.
Well, that's good.
And they do find it very helpful. So you're doing a good job and appreciate you and NDSU putting that information out there. Oh, here's one. And I think, Laura, you've kind of mentioned this, but is Durham considered a wheat class,
Durham
fall
would
under
be
wheat
considered
class?
a wheat. Yes, yes, it is.
Well, we have a few more minutes if anybody wants to ask any more questions. If not, again, this recording or this webinar has been recorded. So if anybody joined late or wasn't able to watch all of it, you can rewatch it. We'll be sending that out, or you can find it on the NDFU YouTube channel along with some of our other educational webinars that we are having. This is part of one of 6 webinars that we're having with different experts on agricultural issues. The next one we'll have is on February 1st, which will be talking about the Alliance to Advance Climate Smart Agriculture. And so be on the lookout for that. If you signed up for this webinar, it would be the same Zoom link if you want. And also I mentioned we have other ones like the farm loan that will be happening March 7th with the FSA office and their team, and also the representatives from the Bank of North Dakota, along with lots of others. So with that, again, I want to thank Laura and Ron for taking the time to join us today and presenting us with this information. And thank you all for joining us. And hopefully you found this educational and helpful as you're making your selections on ARC and PLC. And one final reminder, remember that the deadline, regardless if you're not gonna change your ARC or PLC enrollment decision from last year, you need to go in and do that. So reach out to your local FSA office or Laura or Ron if you have any additional questions. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Amanda.